I don't really know how to start this, so I'll just say it straight. For about 6 weeks last summer, a man stood outside my house every single morning and watched it. Not the street, not his phone, my house. I live in a pretty normal neighborhood in Knoxville. Single-family homes, decent street, people mind their own business. I've been in the same house for 4 years and never had any problems with anyone. The first time I saw him, I was leaving for work around 6:15 in the morning. He was standing on the sidewalk across the street, maybe 40 feet from my front door. White guy, probably late 50s, gray jacket, hands in his pockets, just standing there. I figured he was waiting for someone or had just stopped for a second, so I got in my truck and left. He was there the next morning too. Same spot, same jacket, same position. I started paying attention after that. Over the next 2 weeks, I saw him 7 more times, always between 6 and 7 in the morning, always in the same spot across the street, sometimes for 10 minutes. Sometimes I'd look out the window an hour later, and he'd still be there. He never came to the door, never said anything. If I looked directly at him, he'd look back, no expression, no wave, nothing, just looked back. I asked my neighbor Carol if she knew who he was. She said she'd seen him too, but assumed he was a relative of mine. That was the moment it shifted for me, because it meant he'd been doing this long enough that my neighbors had just accepted him as part of the scenery. I called the non-emergency line. An officer came by, said there was nothing they could do about someone standing on a public sidewalk, told me to call back if he came onto my property or threatened me. I understood that legally. It still didn't help. Then one morning, I walked straight across the street and asked him what he was doing. He looked at me for a second and said, "I used to live here." I told him I'd been in this house 4 years. He said, "Not this house, this street." Then he put his hands back in his pockets and walked away. I watched him go 2 blocks down and get into a car I'd never seen parked there before. He didn't come back after that. I don't know why he started. I don't know why he stopped. I just know that for 6 weeks, someone was out there every morning watching, and I have no idea what he was waiting for. I still check that spot when I leave for work. Old habit now, I guess. I want to say up front that I know how this sounds. I know the first thing people think is that I misremembered, or I was tired, or I'm being paranoid. I've thought all of those things myself, but I know what I know, and some of it I can't explain away no matter how hard I try. I'm a grad student. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Columbus. 2nd floor, 1 entrance, deadbolt, chain lock. I'm careful because I'm a woman living alone, and being careful is just something you do. This started in February. Small things, so small I almost didn't register them. My dish towel was on the wrong hook. I always hang it on the left, and one morning it was on the right. I told myself I'd done it without thinking. A week later, a book on my nightstand was face down when I never leave books face down. I told myself I'd been tired. Then one evening I came home from the library around 9 p.m. and the smell hit me the moment I opened the door. Faint, but there. A smell that wasn't mine. Not food, not something chemical. Just someone else's presence. The way you can tell a room has had a person in it. I stood in the doorway for probably 2 full minutes before I went in. Nothing was visibly wrong, nothing was missing, but the chair at my desk had been moved slightly, pulled out from the desk like someone had sat in it, and my laptop, which I always leave closed, was open. I called my building manager that night. He came up, looked around, said he saw no signs of forced entry, which was true. He said it was possible maintenance had been in, but couldn't confirm without checking the log. He checked the next day and said there was no scheduled maintenance for my unit. I asked if anyone else had a key. He said only the master key that management holds. I asked if that key had been signed out recently. He said he'd look into it and got back to me 2 days later saying there was no record of it being used. I put a small piece of tape across the inside of my door frame that night, low down where it wouldn't be obvious. The kind of thing where if the door opened it'd break. 3 days later, the tape was broken. I moved out within the month. My building manager offered to let me out of the lease early without penalty, which honestly made me more unsettled than reassured, like he knew something he wasn't saying. I never found out who had a key to my apartment. Whoever it was never took anything, never left anything, never confronted me. They just came in, sat at my desk, and left. And I don't know why, and I don't think I ever will. I've been driving long haul for 16 years. I've spent more nights in truck stops and rest areas than I have in my own bed, and I've seen plenty of strange things on the road. I'm not someone who scares easily, and I'm not someone who imagines things. I want that on the record before I tell you this. This happened on a run from Billings down to Salt Lake City about 11 months ago. Straightforward route, one I'd done maybe 30 times. I left at 4 a.m., stopped for fuel and coffee at a Flying J outside of Pocatello around 8:30. There was a man at the counter when I came in. Younger guy, maybe early 30s, dark hoodie, backpack, nothing unusual about him. I got my coffee, used the restroom, was back in my truck in maybe 12 minutes. The man in the dark hoodie was standing in the parking lot when I pulled out, just standing there. I noticed him because it was cold and he wasn't moving toward any vehicle, just standing. I didn't think about it past that. 2 hours later, I stopped at a rest area outside of Tremonton to stretch my legs. It was pretty empty. One other semi, a minivan with out-of-state plates. I walked to the restroom building and back, maybe 5 minutes total. The man in the dark hoodie was sitting at a picnic table about 30 feet from my truck. I want to be precise about this. Pocatello to Tremonton is about 90 miles. I drive a semi at highway speed. There is no logical way a man without a visible vehicle could have traveled that distance and arrived before me or at the same time as me. I was not being followed on the highway. I pay attention to what's behind me. It's part of the job. No vehicle tailed me on that stretch. He didn't look at me. He was just sitting there with his backpack beside him, looking at the ground. I got back in my truck and drove. I didn't stop again until I hit the Salt Lake Valley, almost 2 hours later. I pulled into the distribution center, backed into the dock, got out to check my trailer. I looked across the lot. I didn't see him. I want to be clear about that. He wasn't there. But I stood in that parking lot for longer than I needed to, scanning every corner before I went inside. And I called my wife from the dock, which I don't normally do mid-run, just to hear her voice. I've done that route 4 times since. I don't stop at that rest area in Tremonton anymore. I tell myself it's to save time. I have no explanation for what I saw. I've thought about it almost every time I drive that stretch of I-15. The same man, 90 miles apart, no vehicle, no explanation. I don't know what he was. I don't know what he wanted. I just know I've never driven that highway the same way since. If you have a story of your own, something that happened to you that you still can't explain, send it in. The link is in the description. I read every single one. And if this video kept you up a little later than you planned, that means it did its job. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.